Yo, what is going on, everyone? Welcome back to another video where today we're going to be talking about the top 10 worst contracts in the MLB with some honorable mentions. Before we get into the video, be sure to like and subscribe for more of this content and to make sure you don't miss any more of this content because I'm trying to get as much content out daily to you guys. So let's get into the video. So number 10 is Jacoby Ellsbury for the Yankees. He signed a 7-year, $153 million deal with the Yankees. However, through injury and poor play, he never really played a lot. He sat out or he got injured and missed 2018 and 2019, and he just hasn't played ever again. So, bad deal for the Yankees. They spent a lot of money, and it wasn't worth it in the long run. Even after they got Ellsbury, they went out and got Stanton. They had Judge. So Ellsbury never panned out for them. But when he came over in free agency, he had a couple big years over in Boston. So it sort of made sense that they gave him that deal, but it never panned out. Going on to number 9 is Yoenis Cespedes, one of my favorite players when he was with Oakland. He had a big year. He signed a 4-year, $110 million deal with the Mets. However, he sat out 2020 and he missed 2019 to injury, and he actually missed more time than he played with the Mets under this 4-year contract. So it was a really bad contract, and when he did play, he didn't produce up to what he was being paid for. So it was a bad deal for the Mets, and unfortunately Cespedes never really worked out for them. Going on to number 8, and before we talk about him, let me just know in the comments if you agree with this list or who else you thought should have been on this list. So let's get into number 8. So number 8, we have Josh Hamilton, who signed with the Angels a 5-year, $125 million deal. He dealt with a lot of off-field problems and some on-field problems injury-wise and never panned out for the Angels, and they ended up tanking most of the contract, which was unfortunate for the Angels. Going on to number 7, we have Carl Crawford. The Red Sox actually have a couple names on this list. He signed a 7-year, $142 million deal, and he never panned out. He also dealt with some injuries, but he never really panned out, and he ended up getting traded towards the end of the contract, and Boston ended up eating most of the contract, so he never really was a good deal for Boston. Going on to number 6, and before you guys get mad, we have Miguel Cabrera, but we're not talking about Miguel Cabrera's regular contract. We're talking about the back half of the contract. He was already on a decline when they signed him, and he's just been declining ever since skill-wise. Even though he can teach all the young hitters over in Detroit, he's been declining, and he hasn't been producing at the rate that Detroit wants him to or the rate that he's been paid to do. So we're not talking about the beginning of the contract because obviously it was a good deal, and he was really good at the time, but the last half of the years, and he still has 2 more years after this one and some options that can take it up to 4 more years. So it just never really panned out. He never really produced well, sort of like Albert Pujols' contract. Going on to number 5, we have another Boston Red Sox, Rusney Castillo, 7 years, $72.5 million. Sorry, he signed with the Red Sox out of Cuba. And I think he only played like 50 games with the Red Sox over the 7 years. He spent most of his time in AAA, and Boston ended up tanking the contract, and he never panned out, and I don't think he played in the MLB again. So he only played 50 games over 7 years, but he made $72.5 million dollars from this contract, which is why it was not a very good deal for Boston. Going on to number 4, we have new Dodger, Albert Pujols, who signed a 10-year, $240 million deal with the Angels. He got paid for what he did in St. Louis, which he had monster numbers, but he never panned out in LA, even though he did hit over 200 home runs for the Angels. All of his hitting stats were down from St. Louis, which was expected because he was getting older and they signed him until he was in his 40s. So it never really worked out, and obviously we all know how it ended up. Designated for assignment. He's on the Dodgers now, so maybe he can rejuvenate himself and win a championship with the Dodgers, but they had to tank that last year of the contract. Going on to number 3, we have another Boston Red Sox, Pablo Sandoval. He had a couple good years over in San Francisco. He ended up signing a 5-year, $95 million deal in free agency with the Red Sox, and I think he only played 1 year or half of that 1 year out of the 5 years. Maybe he played 2 years, but he just never really panned out. His offensive numbers were way low. He dealt with some injuries and some other stuff. So Boston ended up eating this contract as well. So that Boston front office 5 years ago did not have some good deals that they made, and Pablo Sandoval was just another one. He did rejuvenate himself as a pinch hitter in Atlanta this year, but his time in Boston wasn't the best. At least for the Red Sox, I mean, he still got $95 million to not play that much, but it was bad for the Red Sox, and that's why he's at number 3. Number 2, we have James Shields, and not just his contract, but his trade too. He signed a 4-year, $75 million deal, and he never really panned out either. And if you guys remember, he was actually traded to Chicago from San Diego for Fernando Tatis Jr. So, I mean, San Diego did pay him $75 million, which was a bad deal at the time because he never panned out, but they got Tatis out of it, who is set to be a superstar and is on a $341 million contract. So it worked out for the Padres in the long run, but it was a bad deal for James Shields because it never worked out. And then number 1, I'm sure you guys can guess who it is. It's Chris Davis. 7 years, $161 million. I don't know what happened to Davis. I don't know how he just fell off that much, but he signed the deal, and the moment he signed it, he just fell off of a cliff as far as his skills go. And even this year, he's out for this year. I mean, I don't know if many people knew, but he actually just had hip surgery, so he's going to be out for this year. Some Baltimore fans were making jokes saying that that might help his career stats, and that's pretty true because his career stats took a hit when he started declining, and he just never worked off that $161 million deal. Baltimore didn't get anything out of it. He got his money, but he never really played, and when he did play, he was really bad. I think he had like the record for most at-bats without a hit a couple years ago, so he just went straight downhill. He was expected to be the face of Baltimore when they had Machado, Jones, Davis, and everyone else, but everyone else got traded or got lost in free agency, and Davis never panned out, and he hasn't played in a while, and he's not going to play for a while, especially with Mountcastle there. So bad move for Baltimore. And then we have some honorable mentions. We have Yasmani Thomas, who signed with the Diamondbacks. It was like a $70 million deal. He just never worked out. I believe he plays in the minors now. Melvin and Justin Upton both signed big deals. I believe Justin Upton still plays for the Angels, and he, even though he has had some big home run years, he just never worked out that big deal. And Melvin Upton played for a couple of teams, was still on a big deal, so it never really worked out for both of them. Jordan Zimmerman signed a huge deal with Detroit. Never worked out. He ended up getting released. They tanked the contract. It was a bad deal all around. Ryan Howard's big deal with the Phillies never really worked out. He didn't play up to what they expected. Jason Hayward, who's still been pretty good defensively and has still been a pretty good major league player, he never played up to what they expected him to play up to, so that's why he's on the honorable mentions, but he didn't make the list. Alex Gordon dealt with a lot of injuries throughout his contract. Prince Fielder had a career-ending injury, actually, which is why he's on this honorable mentions list, because he didn't get to play a lot, but when he did play, he was super good. And then Tanner Roark, because Blue Jays fans probably know a lot about Roark. He was extremely bad, and he was making like $12.5 million a year to have an ERA as a Blue Jay of like 7. So that's the honorable mentions. Let me know what you think about this list. Do you agree with it? Do you think anybody else should be on it? Do you think these are bad deals, or do you think some of them were maybe good in the long run, like the Tatis deal? Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next one.